teaches these things. These are all made up doctrines and ideas that the Orthodoxy has created. And for what reason? Because they follow their false teachers, and therefore that's the direction they go into. And you have, look at the movement and stuff, the Orthodox, they wear white and black and stuff. Okay, there's nothing in the Torah that tells you that you're only bound to two colors of clothing that you can wear, and that's it. Okay? And yet you have this religious movement that thinks this is it, we're righteous, we're holy because we wear two colors, and then they even give you reasons for it. Oh, it's because we're mourning and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter how many reasons they give you. What matters is the Bible doesn't teach this. And the Bible does not give us this version of belief and reasoning to follow, and therefore it becomes bondage, okay? The Bible doesn't tell us to wear a kippah, which is this round little knitted thing that's around this big and put it on top of our head. Yet they understand they have to cover the head, and they understand it needs to be covered. And there's a lot of these things we start realizing and stuff that, like, what's going on? And see, I was a part of these things, okay? With lack of knowledge, I lacked understanding. I had to search things out and understand it for myself. What was wrong? You have to too. Doesn't matter where you're getting the information from, whether it's people that want to profess faith in Jesus or people that are sitting there saying, oh, no, we believe in keeping Torah. This is what we're supposed to be doing. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what group tries to do what. You got the Orthodoxy that's going to act like they're the Jews and they're it and that's all there is and they're the ones who teach the truth and stuff. And you got to stop and say, stop, okay? I don't care what any of you say. What does the Torah teach? Because Isaiah the prophet says, if it does not come from the Torah, there is no truth in them. There is no light in them. Okay? The Torah is the answer. And don't look for, please, a definite, straightforward, it says right here, answer. There are so many laws in the Torah law that do not come from straightforward answers. Okay? It comes from learning. It comes from investigating. It comes from reading and studying and listening carefully to what's being said. And that's because this is life. Life is about the yes and the no's and the all of the other things that come in between. Okay? And so the problem that was happening is here's this false grace movement teaching that's going on, and the struggle of what do I do with my kids? My kids, they want to go out on the Sabbath and they want to come in on the Sabbath. What do I do? There's no roof. We don't have any roof whatsoever. Okay? Simple answer. Tell them to keep Shabbat. Tell them not to violate the Sabbath. Be the example. Set the example. Show them that the Torah means business. You see, the Torah gives us a commandment, and we learn this from the Torah itself, that you shall honor your father and your mother, and you shall keep the Sabbath and not desecrate it. Now, the question of why is these two passages written side by side? Well, the Torah is teaching us something very huge and unanimous. And that's the fact of, as a child, you might get deceived and think, well, my parents telling me to do something, I have to obligatedly do it because the Torah says honor your father and mother. That's not true. If your parents are teaching you to do something that's in violation of the Torah, the Bible says you're to do the opposite. You're to keep what the Torah says. This is why we have to understand this and stuff, that if the parent does keep the Torah, and the parent is honoring God by keeping the commandments, that we have a dual thing that we have to learn to follow and understand, and that's follow your parents. Do what they're saying, and follow God. It's a double thing. If your parents are doing what the Torah says, then you're going to ultimately want to sit there and follow God, because you're going to be sitting there going, well, my parents are doing what the Torah says, and I'm told to do what God says as well, so I'm going to follow the Torah as well, right? And this is the thing we have to understand, because it's hard. I mean, we live in a society that's very difficult. Kids are being pulled at all the time. Pulled at. The enemy's using their emotions because they feel isolated. Why do you think Jacob and everything that happened to Jacob's kids were written? It was to encourage us to understand that when we're isolated from everything, what happens? Our families get affected. My own kids, I cannot tell you how many times have been affected because there's this attitude of, I feel so isolated. I feel so left I don't know what to do. And they feel pulled. They're young. They're immature. They lack the wisdom and understanding that we have as adults. And they're trying to find in their own heart, what am I supposed to do? And there's these pulls because look at the kids. The Bible tells us what? Yaakov's kids, they all struggled. Why did they struggle? They struggled because they went through a hard life. They struggled because they were isolated. They struggled because there was nobody around to have a community with. And they had to follow God on their own. And this was a very difficult thing. And look at all the trials that all the kids got through. Look at all the trials they went through. Look at all the mistakes they made. This is the hard thing. We have to be the generation that stands up. We have to be the generation that encourages our kids to fight. Because this is where they're struggling. They're being pulled at. They're being pulled at to push against the parents. And think about it. You're the only person telling them this is what they need to do, and they think in their head, is this real? I mean, you're the only person saying this is what I'm supposed to do. So they question it. The beauty is, the Bible will back you up. God will use his word to defend you, who's keeping. And this is why it's so important to understand this, that you have to show your kids love. You have to show your kids that constant attitude of, I'm here to lead you, I'm here to guide you, I'm here to help you. And you got to let your kids understand that you're not going to back down. That you're going to be the warrior that's going to keep pushing forward and keep pressing them that they need to do what's right. Because when they read the scriptures, they're going to see the fact that what you taught them is the right path. And, how do you deal with the kids when they just don't want to listen? You have to learn to just also don't ever compromise. But when they don't want to listen, you learn to love them and you learn to encourage them that the path they're on is not the right path. And you pray for them that they will do teshuvah. And you encourage them to do teshuvah. Life is hard, especially for the kids. Oh my goodness, it's hard. You want to talk about, I think about how bad it was when I was a kid. And I think our kids today, they have it far worse. They do. I can say that I had a growing up where I had parents and adult figures that were in my life that said things and tried to impact their attitude of, you got to think through things, the authoritarian stuff. These generations, no, it's gone. It's destroyed. You might not even be one that has grandparents that follow, or that you might be the one that doesn't have aunts and uncles. You might be the one even your own parents aren't following, and you're the only voice of these kids. How would you feel if you were them? You would feel like that's really hard. That's really, really, really difficult. That's a lot to bear for a kid. The enemy's trying to break down this generation of kids to make them stupid, to make them dumb, to make them rebellious, and to make them simple-minded. And to question the authoritarian, to question the leadership. This is all that you see over and over again the enemy is trying to do. The enemy is just trying to bad at these kids. Because the enemy wants to affect them in a negative way, to try to get them to be so rebellious out of their own lack of understanding, their lack of wisdom, so that they can cause more and more punishment to come on the earth. And this is why we have to stand up for them. This is why we have to encourage them that we're going to be the ones that's going to stand up and say, sweetie, I know you're deceived. And you know what? You're wrong for what you're doing. And I love you, and I want you to do what's right. And I pray for the day that you repent and do teshuvah. Because we have to. We have to lead them back and encourage them to Torah. And it might take months. It might take years. But we got to fight for it. The Sabbath is not something that we should ever play with. And I know there's people out there that they're very serious. No, I'm going to keep the Sabbath. I want to do what's right. What do I do? Whenever you see things where people are trying to lenient themselves, just say, stop for a second here. Just time out. You're wanting to do what? This is not what the Torah commands. The Torah says in the book of Shemot that you shall only go forth and come back. And the maximum distance that the Torah gives us is the 2,000 amot distance. Now, here's where everyone screws it up. It doesn't mean that if I go 100 amot out and I have another 100 amot distance left I can go, that once I go 100 amot out and stop, that I can still go the other 100 amot. No, that's not at all what the Torah allows. It's whatever distance it is, no matter how far that distance is, the max is 2,000 amot, excuse me. The max is 2,000 amot. So it doesn't matter. I know I said 100 amot, which I'm sorry, didn't mean to screw you up on that part. But if I walked 100 amot and I know I got another, 1,000 and I'm thinking 900 amot I can walk and stuff, you don't. Whatever distance you went out, all you can do is return back. That's it. That's why the Torah teaches us the fact that you're going out and you're coming back is all you can do. The max distance is 2,000 amot. So I can walk out up to 2,000 amot and I must walk back. And that going out was always to go to a congregation, go a place of worship, go to a place of learning Torah. That's what the whole purpose of it was, is to go and in your tent, if you were living in the days of Moses, you could leave that tent, go to another person's tent, learn about Shabbat, learn about the Torah, learn about the Chagim, learn about the mitzvot. And at the end of the service, you come back home and you eat your meal and you enjoy your time with your family and you talk about Shabbat, you talk about the halachas and the Torah, right? But that was it. So the distance wasn't meant to sit there and say, well, if I walk 50 amot here, well, I still got, an extra 1,000. No, you don't. The Torah only allows that whatever distance, how short ever it is, that you choose to go in one direction, you have only the ability to return. You cannot keep going forward and then return back. You can't. That's a violation of the Torah. So we got to encourage our kids to keep Shabbat. We got to encourage our kids to keep the Torah. We have to encourage our kids to do what's right. And so if they're going to violate, your attitude should be, sweetheart, this is totally not the way I'm raising you. And I don't want you to do this. And I would pray that you'd really rethink what you're doing, because this isn't what the Torah teaches us. Learn the Torah commandments. Learn to teach them to your children so they know how to keep it properly. Learn to know these things so you know how to allocate these things accurately and proficiently to your kids so that they know, without a shadow of a doubt, you know what you're talking about. Because the worst thing you can ever do is not really understand it, not know it, but you're trying to defend something that you can't defend because you don't have that knowledge to stand up in opposition to what it is they're doing. We have to keep our kids focused on doing what's right. We're the ones they're looking at. And remember this, they're kids. And when a child gets to the age of 20, well, that's now when he becomes an adult, and you have to learn to accept the fact that he has to live with what decisions he makes. And you have to do everything you can to encourage, but he's an adult. And that person at that stage, is going to bear the adult consequences of his mistakes. Okay? And that's why we want to do everything we can, because if you're isolated, and a lot of people out there, that's what it is. They're isolated. They're stuck. And their kids are bored out of their minds because they feel like this is all we have. This is all there is. And they're trying to find something to entertain that mindset of theirs that emotionally is caused to feel like, I just sick and tired of feeling like we're just alone and this is just how it is, Because, yeah, I get it. You know what? Life was not meant to be this way. But unfortunately, this is what we have to deal with. And we need to do what's right. And that's what's called an attack of the enemy. as to how many people are caught up in the deception of not keeping the Torah. That's what's called an attack of the enemy, why the world is in such a disarray, and while there's so much violation, that they're the ones wanting more judgment to be brought upon the earth, when we want to do everything we can to stop it. We want to do everything we can to encourage people to do teshuvah, so they're not caught up in that garbage. This is why we need to pray for our kids. We need to pray for our communities. We need to pray for the people out there that we see that's caught up in the garbage. And we need to know what the Torah really teaches. We need to separate the lies and know what the truth is. We need to not just separate and push out the lies, but we need to also show people why these things are wrong and what it is that these things are doing as to why it's confusing them and getting them caught up in falsehood. Because our life depends upon it, and the lives of others depend upon it. You know, to encourage a person to do teshuvah is saving a life. To encourage a person to change the direction they're going in is saving a human soul from destruction. And I want you to really think about this and stuff, because, you know, leniency doesn't mean violation. Leniency means, what did the Torah say was so bizarre, was so out of the norm, or was so extreme, that a change of law had to be made for that specific case, that case alone. I mean, the Bible even tells us that the Kohanim, that on the Sabbath, that they are told to do certain things, which in a normal case, and in a normal situation where everybody else is involved, it's a violation. Why are they able to do it? Because the Torah says that those things are considered extreme measures needed for an extreme situation. And they're the ones who are permitted to do that, because they're involved in what the Torah tells us is an extreme situation. And that because of that, this is the obligation of what they're allowed to do. I hope you get encouraged. I want to encourage you. We're going to continue this topic in another video as I continue going on talking about this issue. And we're going to talk about this using the scripture itself to point these things out to encourage you. I'll see you next time.